I'm Ry Walker, founder of Tembo, a managed Postgres company, and today I have Burak from Ubicloud. How do you say Ubi?
Ubicloud, yeah.
Ubi, okay, Ubi. Yeah, like Ubisoft.
Yeah,
but
kind
cloud.
of. Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast, Burak.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me here.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to start, with giving us a quick background. Like, I'm curious, like, where'd you grow up and what were you doing before Postgres?
Sure. So, hello everyone. This is Burak, and I work as a software developer, and I guess in reverse chronological order, I worked at Microsoft, Citus Data, and SAP on distributed databases in all three. And currently I worked at a startup called Ubicloud. We are basically building a new cloud provider. And the primary thing we do differently than other providers is that, all the code is open. Like you can think it as a open alternative to existing cloud providers. You can go to GitHub, check out the code, set it up on a bare metal server, and then you can have your own cloud. Or you can use our managed offering, of course. So yeah, this is brief history of me working professionally.
Yeah, nice. So you're open sourcing, essentially open sourcing what AWS and GCP and Azure have done.
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing it like what Linux is to proprietary operating system. This is what we are doing for the cloud providers.
Yeah, and you only have to build 300 different services on top of it, right? But luckily, a lot of those are open source too.
Kinda. Well, I guess our current plan is not building all 200, 300 services because, most of the time, people use only 10, at most 20. If you implement 20 of them, I guess you have 80% of the use cases. So I guess this is our initial plan. But yeah, I mean, we never know what would feature show.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'm excited to watch it evolve and hopefully partner with you guys at some point. So
yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah.
Do you remember when you first started using Postgres?
Yeah, I do. Well, to be honest, when I started programming, I started as a web developer, and at that time, LAMP stack was very, very common. So my first database was MySQL. But then I started working at Citus Data, and which is the place that I started working development part of the Postgres. So basically, for people who don't know Citus Data, the Citus Data was the company behind many popular extensions such as Citus or pgcron or PostgreSQL HLL. And so when I first joined Citus Data, I initially worked on building Citus extension. And while doing that, you need to dig to the Postgres code to. First, you need to understand, and then you build your extension on top of it. And then we built our own managed service. So I switched to that team to build a Postgres managed service. And some of our customers they were heavily using PostgreSQL HLL extension. And at that time, the original authors of the PostgreSQL extension, they went through an acquisition process and they didn't have enough time at their hand to maintain the extension. And we know the people, and at that time PostgreSQL community was much smaller. So we just called them and said that, hey, we want to maintain this extension. What do you think about? And they were pretty happy to find a new maintainer. So long story short, I found myself as the maintainer of the PostgreSQL extension. And then the Citus Data got acquired by Microsoft, and then I continued my Postgres journey on Microsoft. We also build a managed service there. I guess that's how I start with Postgres development.
Nice.
Well, not
Yeah.
just start, like until the almost whole journey.
Yeah. And are you taking a little bit of a break from it right now, or are you working on Postgres stuff over at Ubicloud?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we use Postgres in Ubicloud as well. So
Yeah.
like most of my professional community, like the friends, and they are from Postgres community.
Yeah.
So there's no way I can leave that community at all.
Yeah.
So, but as a cloud provider, Ubicloud also needs to offer a Postgres service. So we are planning some things, like it's not very well defined yet, but I think eventually we will have something for Postgres as well.
Out of curiosity, are you guys, I'm sure this was a hotly debated topic, but Kubernetes or no Kubernetes inside of Ubicloud?
Well, in our case, right now no Kubernetes. We have a pretty simple control plane, which if you want, I think you can move it to Kubernetes, but right now we don't use it. Not that we have anything against Kubernetes. It's just, I guess, right now we don't need that complexity, I believe.
Yeah. Well, I imagine you'll have managed Kubernetes. You'd have to have that. That'll be one of your first 20, most likely. So
definitely, because managed Kubernetes is quite one of the most demanded products, so it needs to be one of the first 20.
Yeah, great. Well, so again, you were working on Citus. The Citus was it, when you started working on it, was it an extension or was it I don't know the full history. Was it a fork at any point and then became an extension or?
Yeah, at the beginning it was a fork, and just before I joined the team, it became an extension. So basically, Citus become an extension and become an open source at the same time. And I think I joined Citus team in like 1 month after that.
Got it. So you never were part of that previous era. So were a lot of the hard problems already solved? Would you say with Citus? Like, usually I was just did a talk with the PostGIS team, and they said early on is where they solved the most of the problems, and it was more gradual after that. Is that the case with Citus too, or was there a big project that happened after you joined?
Well, I think most of the difficult problems were already solved, and to be honest, I think one of the problems with the extension development is that there isn't good documentation about it. Like for Postgres has pretty good documentation for user-facing features, but if you want to, like as a developer, there isn't that much resources, so you usually need to read lots of Postgres code. And to be honest, I think Postgres code is pretty readable for a project at its size and at that big and that old. So like I think that's a huge plus. But still, you need to read a lot of code to understand what you need to do. And in our case, thankfully, Citus hired one of the most prominent contributors of the Postgres Andres front, and he primarily lead the effort to make Citus an extension.
Got it.
And I think at that time, I believe Postgres extension framework also didn't have some of the features we need, so we had to do some hacky workarounds. But eventually, Postgres extension framework also got improved, and we had chance to remove those hacky workarounds.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like that's happening now with lots of a lot of the innovation in Postgres happens as a fork, with the hope that in a version or two it can become an extension, and then maybe a couple versions after that it becomes a less hacky extension, right? Like you can streamline it down.
Hopefully, yeah.
But it's a 4-year journey or so. Yeah. Tell me about PostgreSQL HLL. Tell me what's HLL stand for?
Yeah, well, HLL stands for Hyperloglog, and it is an extension to make a cardinality estimation, which is a fancy way of saying doing count listing, but approximately. And let me first explain why approximately. The reason is doing count listing as an accurate number is pretty difficult. Well, not difficult, but maybe unfeasible. If your data size is small, that's okay. But if you have lots of data, the usual way is keeping a hash map. So every time or hash set, every time you see an item, you put it to hash set, and at the end you count number of items in it. But if you have lots of data, that becomes unfeasible. If you have a distributed system, like if you are doing count listing in 2 different nodes, that becomes even more difficult, because let's say you bite the bullet and calculate the count listing in one node and the other node. Like, it's not possible to merge the result because there might be common elements. You cannot just sum them up. So what Hyperloglog does is it uses an approximation algorithm. I can go into detail of it as well, to have an internal representation of the number of unique elements, which is both memory efficient compared to like doing a hash map, which is also easy to merge. So it allows you to do like the parallel computing. And the only gotcha is it is not an exact number, it's an approximation. But it turns out that we don't need exact number most of the time. Like, for example, especially in analytical use cases, let's say you want to count the number of unique users that visit your website. It doesn't matter if they are 4 million or 4.1 million. Like, you want a ballpark number. And also, the good thing is the error rate of Hyperloglog is quite small. Like, it is usually around 2%, and you can make it even smaller if you give it a bit more memory. Like, you can make it more accurate. So this Hyperloglog algorithm is just out there, and what PostgreSQL Hyperloglog does is it implements this algorithm for PostgreSQL.
Yeah. So how much of a resource reduction would you estimate that using that approximation? So you lose a percentage or two of accuracy, but you get how much less compute required?
You usually it's about 1.5 kilobytes. So the Hyperloglog data structure on default, it takes about 1.5 kilobytes of memory.
So very
very, very small.
Orders of magnitude smaller. Yeah.
Actually, loglog parts come from that. So, like, if you are dealing with 32-bit integers, it can go up to 2 to the 32. You get the log of that, it is 32. You get another log that you get 5. So you need 5 bits of the memory to be able to store one bucket. And then what Hyperloglog does is it keeps multiple buckets to increase the accuracy. So at the end, it ends up about like 1.5 kilobyte.
Got it. So how involved were you in that extension? Did you start it or did you inherit it?
I inherited it. Actually, another startup called Aggregate Knowledge built that extension. Then I think they got acquired by Newstar, and at that time, the project was not maintained frequently, so there were some boxes we need to be merged in, and like our customers were also using it. So we contacted the original authors and said that, hey, we want to maintain this, and they were happy to hand over the maintainership to us. And then after that, we did bug fixes, we did regular releases. I presented a few conference talks about hyperloglog in pgconf EU and pgconf US. Yeah, that that's the overall story.
So I'm curious, have you been able to disconnect from, I imagine it's easier to disconnect from Citus as an extension, after leaving Microsoft, but like disconnecting from this extension, PostgreSQL, HLL, like, are you still kind of watching that because you have that knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of emotional bond to that extension. And
yeah,
well, for example, there were few improvements that I wanted to do, but I didn't had time while working at Microsoft, and it just itches me from time to time, and like I get, and it is open source, so I guess at some point in near future I'll open a pull request, and hopefully it would get merged. I hope.
Yeah, got it. But Microsoft team controls that extension as it sits today. Yeah.
Yeah, right now Microsoft team controls they continue to do regular releases, and every time new PostgreSQL version comes up, they ensure that it works well, and they update the packages, release new packages. If there's a bug report, they are the one who fixes it.
How many extensions? I mean, obviously there's the Citus extension, this one. How many total extensions would you say like Microsoft has in Postgres? I know maybe it's hard to nail down a number, but is there a bunch of others too?
There are. There's Citus, there's PostgreSQL HLL. There is PG Cron, which is also quite popular. It is a Cron-based job scheduler.
Yeah, I just started using that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It is primarily developed by Markov Slot. There is one extension to ensure that Postgres works. Postgres is well integrated with Azure, so there's like an extension called PG Azure. I think it's not open source, but like if you start a Postgres instance from Azure and check the extensions, there's that extension.
Yeah.
There is there's Topan, so which is also approximation based extension. It gives you top n element of a sorted list, and like if you think about it, it is also expensive operation to do on big data sets, because you need to sort them first and take the top n. And I think there are more optimized algorithms where you can keep a heap, which is more memory efficient, but you still need to go over lots of data. And so at that time, at Citus, we also developed this top n extension.
Nice.
Actually, if you look at it, the general theme is about being able to do things at scale, because Postgres is already pretty good at doing things in a single node, and like the Citus primary use case was make a distributed PostgreSQL, and we developed a few extensions to, make some operations that are not feasible to do at scale, and find a ways to make them more feasible.
So I'm curious, are there some big milestones in Postgres that you're looking forward to?
Well, actually, I was looking forward for Postgres 16 release, mostly because of the logical replication improvement. There are few, and I think there will be more upcoming, because I think logical replication is a very powerful concept, but it is still a bit cumbersome to use it with PostgreSQL, especially when there's a change in the data, like when you run a DDL command or when you have a failover. So there are few gotchas, and I think with the Postgres 16, some of these are less problematic, and maybe I hope in the upcoming versions it would be even easier to use. Because with when you have a very solid logical replication, it opens up lots of cool features. Well, one thing that I personally invested in is being able to do like zero downtime failovers. And when I say downtime, I mean like the real zero downtime, not just like 1 second downtime, but real zero downtime. And I think logical replication, that solid logical replication would open up that.
Yeah, I agree. It's like it's one thing to do that too with a single node, versus a Citus cluster too, right? Zero downtime gets complicated the more complicated your deployment is. But I agree on a single deployment. I have this idea where we could basically build scaffolding around the existing thing, whatever it takes. Like get another one working. In other words, temporarily have replication happening, and then somehow seamlessly up above, you have to have some fulcrum that you can, so it's a complicated thing to figure out, but I think it'd be great for a managed service provider to basically build up temporary infrastructure that helps the zero downtime thing happen. If that's true, then you can restart, with for all kinds of reasons, with impunity, like auto scaling is possible, stuff like that. So
yeah. And one reason I especially interested in was that in our previous managed service, we do lots of operations via failover. Like, for example, if you want to scale up, what we would do is we create another server with with higher number of cores, and then we would do failover. Or if you want to, like, for example, we might need to do maintenance, like maybe we found a security vulnerability, or there is the regular maintenance. What we would do is, instead of going and patching the existing server, we would create a new one, and then we do failover to that one. And each of those failovers, it takes some amount of downtime, which is obviously not preferable and not a good experience for customers. So, but if they were the virtually free from the perspective of customers, like if they don't even notice that there's a failover, then you can do as many failovers as you want.
It's definitely you share the same vision as I do there. I think it would be exciting to get there. So I'm curious though, if there was one thing that you could if you had a magic wand and this weekend something new would be in Postgres core, like what would it be? What would you use that wand on?
Yeah, that's difficult. I want lots of things. Like picking one is difficult. But I guess one thing that bothers me is that for high availability and backups, you always need to depend the third-party tool. I would really love that to be solved in Postgres. Like, for example, for Redis, it comes with very good default settings that you can use for high availability. But for Postgres, there are solutions, there are good solutions, but I would love them to be in the core.
Yeah, I get that for sure. It's tricky when you have to buy a product, or let's say you adopt a product and you immediately have to adopt X additional products right off the bat, and that's not a good feeling. It feels complex, right? Yeah, that's cool. Do you have any? I would say, do you have any opinions about Postgres that almost nobody agrees with you about? Are you a contrarian in any area that you can think of?
Let me see. I don't think so. Well,
maybe that's one of the areas that you think backup should be inside.
I mean, yeah, there is that, but I know there are people who also share that opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's okay. I was just curious. It's always fun to talk about those things if they exist. Give you a
Well, there
a
is
soapbox.
actually there is one thing, but that's also
Okay.
even I think Tembo kind of agrees with me on that one. Is that
Yeah.
I think many different use cases can be implemented in Postgres. So
Yep.
instead of having a lot of specialized databases, you can have Postgres, and with some configuration and maybe a few extensions, you can implement Kafka in Postgres. You can implement
Yeah.
Redis. You can implement like the NoSQL in Postgres. I guess if I said this maybe 2-3 years ago, probably I would get more raised eyebrows. But now I think
Yeah.
more people starting to think like that, and I think Tembo is also thinking things along similar lines, right?
Yeah, I think there's openness to it. With one of the, I talked to, a lot of people, and the question is, how people are like, Postgres for everything, or question is like, what percentage of developers are actually on that bandwagon? It obviously on Twitter it just takes one person, and it's a big community too. To make a, especially if it's a contrarian view. But I'm kind of curious. One of the things I want to find out over the next few months is what percentage of developers would actually, if this Postgres for everything was real, would they actually use it? Versus still saying, and I think it all comes down to quality. I think, yeah, you can do Kafka-like work on Postgres right now, but it doesn't feel as clean as buying Confluent. That seems like a very safe decision, and doing something like Kafka on Postgres seems like like you're just kind of stringing together a Rube Goldberg machine, and it doesn't feel like a solid. But the question is, if those solutions were solid, would people use them? And that's our that's our big thesis, is that if they were solid, people would use them. But I just don't know what percentage of people would do that. Is it a big percentage or a small percentage? So
I'm not sure. But there is one interesting thing that come into my mind is, well, today Postgres supports JSON B type, but it was not like that all the time. So in the earlier days, if you want to store JSON data, we had an extension called HStore, which we still have, but not as commonly used as before. And what HStore does is, and this is one of the very powerful part of PostgreSQL extension framework. HStore defined the data type, and on top of it, they defined how you can hash this data type and how you can compare this data type. And when you do this in Postgres allows you to create index on that data type. So suddenly, you are not only able to store JSON data, but you can index it. And at that time, this is kind of rare things, even for NoSQL database. So I think it's a bit funny, and also it shows the power of PostgreSQL extension framework, is that suddenly you are able to do what NoSQL database does, but better. I mean, not in all perspectives, like connection scaling was still a problem, but I mean, being able to index NoSQL data, being able to index JSON, it was a rare feature even for NoSQL databases, but you had it in Postgres. So that's, I don't know, maybe some of these other database or other use cases, Postgres might have something unexpected that would make it better.
Yeah, an unexpected advantage. Yeah, it's the same way with like PG Vector right now. Like the great thing about doing vector, embeddings inside of Postgres is that you don't have to move the data out of Postgres as part of the process, right? You can just add a column and keep it where it is, whereas anybody else has, if it's an external, if it's a vector database that's specific for that use case, like you have to have data pipelines and all that kind of machinery, which that's to me one of the big benefits of keeping it all in Postgres is less data movement, and less data movement can mean, much like no data delays and all that kind of stuff go away. So yeah, I agree
Yeah.
with you. There's a lot of unexpected benefits for keeping things together.
Yeah. I guess since Postgres provides pretty strong asset guarantees, uh, it allows you to build things on top of that. And when you have asset, then you can be much more free to develop complex features. Because what I realize is like while developing software, most of the time as a developer, I try to ensure that, hey, like what I'm doing is atomic, or what I'm doing does not, it is isolated, so it's not cause any problems if something is coming and not in the expected order. But you have chance to delegate all this to Postgres. I think that gives you a quite bit of advantage.
Well, one of the things I love too is that because the Postgres core team is quite separated from the commercial products, is that I just think it seems like a very stable chassis, to build these things on top of, and you really can't, if it's more of a captive open source project, say like what Kafka is to Confluent, like they can move Kafka quickly if they need to for commercial, to help their commercial product, but that could introduce more instability. I just don't see this Postgres team doing anything very risky, which to me is a great counterbalance to, people, developers trying to move fast and build crazy cool new things. It's just nice to have that as a stability factor, I think, inside the product.
I think so, yeah. Well, I guess historically, I think the Postgres community kind of divided into camps, and like some of them would want to implement new shiny thing, and some of them would try to, hey, like just let's get stabilized. And I believe this JSON-B support comes from the part who wants to innovate and try new things. And at the beginning, I think they got some hesitation from the other camp. But at the end, I guess what they do proved itself to be very valuable. And then now JSON-B support is one of the most widely used features of Postgres.
Yeah.
So I guess there is some sort of balance to try risky things and also try being stabilized.
If you look at like the number of, the change log for Postgres 16, they did a lot of things, it's almost more than anyone can keep in their head. It's that's what I'm saying. Like, the good stuff gets through. It's just the bar is high, and then there's just with a lot of assurances that they didn't break any part of Postgres in the process. I really appreciate that part of this thing, and it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited to be building a product on top of it. So
yeah. Well, at the same time, it is sometimes a bit frustrating because sometimes you have a feature, you want it to be merged in. Like you might be author, or you might be just someone watching from the side and desperately need that feature. And then you see that like there is a huge discussion going on, and like people cannot convince each other, and it falls to the next release cycle, which is like 1 year later. So that's a bit frustrating, but I guess, it is kind of cost of having a quite stable system.
It's the cost, and like I said, I think. Well, obviously, I haven't been here, for the 26 years watching the mailing lists, and maybe I'm jumping in here relatively late in the cycle, and I just appreciate all the efforts and all the debates and all the fights and that have happened there, because I think it's created such a great, core engine. All right, well, so where can listeners find you online? I imagine you're on X.
They can find me at X, at LinkedIn. I guess those two would be the places they could find me. But mostly at X, my alias is at B Yucesoy. So basically my first letter of my name and my last name.
Great. Well, we're excited to see, the outcome of your, as you guys are shipping Ubicloud. Excited to see that. And yeah, appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me here. It was a great talk. I enjoyed a lot. And I'm definitely looking for the other episodes to release so that I can listen.